Good morning and welcome to another edition of Brewin on Broad Street. I'm Steve Snyder, entrepreneur in residence here at Gesmer Updegrove, and it is a real treat for me to be with my good friend Dan Gertrudes, who is the founder of GrowthLab. And what's so coincidental, Dan, is that it is almost exactly 10 years ago today that we first met.
It is. It's amazing, 10 years, right? And actually, I met you through one of my former CEOs when I was in corporate, David Wisen, and he was starting his company, and you were actually one of our advisors in attorney. So we do go, I hate to say it, we go back pretty far.
Well, that's when we were 15, right? Or at least I was 15. You were much younger. So welcome.
Those were the days.
Welcome.
Thank you, Steve. So
tell us about you and your background.
So I spent 15 years in Fortune 500 type companies. I always start my pitches, my sales pitches with, I am not a CPA, I am not an accountant, I'm definitely not a bookkeeper. You wouldn't want me doing your books. But I happen to be a non-accountant who owns an accounting firm. So over those 15 years, I had tremendous experience, M&A, corporate development. I had great mentors, many of which you know, that really gave me the energy to, in 2013, to go figure out something else in my life, to latch on to that entrepreneurial journey. And so here I am 10 years later. And I remember you were one of the first people I came to outside of my immediate network to ask for advice. And the first thing you're like, oh yeah, I've got plenty of fractional CFO referrals for you, Dan. I was like, oh, okay, this is too easy. It's not that easy, but it takes a lot of grit.
And I do remember our first meeting. It was at a coffee shop near Brown University.
Was it?
Yes.
I thought it was here in your office. You had
those no.
Fenway seats.
I do have the old Boston Garden seats, but I am absolutely sure it was at a coffee shop near Brown.
Wow.
So time flies.
Time flies. And it's been a great relationship. And I do have to, and I've expressed this to you, I have tremendous respect for you. I love how you give without expecting anything in return. And that, to me, is something that's been a guiding light in my entrepreneurial journey. We get up every day. We do our best. Empathy, compassion, I think is at the core of any entrepreneurial journey.
That's really kind of you to say, and one of the common threads that we have and that so many in our ecosystem have is simply wanting to create value and help people succeed. So thank you for saying that.
Anytime.
So tell us a bit about GrowthLab.
Okay, so it was about 10 years ago. I started GrowthLab. Originally, I was focused because it was just me, myself, and I. It was scary, but it was fun. I was focused on providing fractional CFO services to scaling startups. And I remember my first customer was the Purple Carrot, Andy Levitt. And I learned a lot about what these startups really needed and what they didn't need. And I also saw the opportunity to not just provide that higher level CFO service, but how critical the bookkeeping and accounting is to the infrastructure of these startups. You know, it's not as if every startup needs accrual accounting. You don't need to be spending $2,500 a month on keeping your books up to date. But it's important to at least start somewhere so you have a baseline. And I understood that really quickly, partly because I was not an accountant, but having been in corporate, I was surrounded by accountants, I was surrounded by analysts, and I saw the need. And so one of my first steps was I acquired a bookkeeping business, which I closed that transaction in April 2015. Amazing. And along the way, I met Stephen Byler, who became my business partner. And I still remember my first intern, Corey Knoyer, who's now also a shareholder of GrowthLab. And from there, we built out the bookkeeping, the accounting, and started building out the FP&A, which to me is very near and dear. It's such a great tool that is cost effective because you don't always need a CFO, right? What you need is just plain old boring cadence type planning. And then from there, for a guy who's never filed his taxes on time in April 2020, as the
But
world
make
was
sure
letting
everyone
everybody.
understands you do file for extensions.
I do file, yes, I do file my extensions. I never in a million years thought I would have a tax practice inside of GrowthLab. And I came across this really, really young 70-year-old. He became our vice president of tax strategy, Stephen Cummings. And from there, we started growing our tax. And today we also provide HR services. And the last piece that I will have to plug is with an acquisition we did about 2 years ago. Corey Kenoyer is now the CEO of our new company called Streams.io, STRMS. And our customer base is, ironically, mostly CPAs and accountants. So there's a journey.
It is
And
very,
10 years later.
it's so exciting because you started with working with really early stage companies, but now it is a complete range of companies. Companies, yes, startups, but others that have scaled rapidly, mid-sized companies and larger, and you're providing a whole series of different types of services for them.
Yeah, it's one of the things that are sort of that you probably don't even know about us is one of our side hustles is we actually work with a lot of accountants and CPAs. We have speaking engagements. We try to teach the industry, elevate the industry to understand the power and the importance of providing advisory services, FP&A services to what's typically a very tax-centric industry. We were just speaking at QB Connect, which to me was great. We teach at Brown University, which is fun. So for me, it's more about a little bit of that at this point now, 10 years later, continuing to disrupt this industry because it needs it, and to hopefully elevate this industry and the team members. Accountants work their tails off, and I don't think the customers really understand that.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that point because you have worked with so many dozens of companies that have completed very successful financings and even lots that have completed very successful liquidity events. What's the advice and guidance that you can give to entrepreneurs regarding those fundamental puzzle pieces that they need to consider as they begin the process?
So I'm going to lead that question with something you always say. You could put 5 people in the room, you're going to get 5 different answers. I use that all the time, Steve. But back to your question, what's important? Surrounding yourself with smart, trustworthy advisors. And I believe that's something that you and others in this ecosystem bring to the table. Yes, raising capital is important. So what are some of the fundamental things that startups should have? It starts with a good, solid story that's grounded in financials. 1. 2, understanding the product market fit and being able to articulate that value proposition, obviously not just to the market, but to your investors. And the third piece is more of that infrastructure within a company. It's never too late to start. I would almost make the argument sometimes it's too early to start and focusing on some of the infrastructure, focusing more on product market fit, and making sure your story is grounded in financials.
Perfect advice. So we're going to shift. I'm going to ask you about something that has nothing to do with accounting. You ready?
I'm ready. I'm always ready.
I am told that Portugal is one of the most gorgeous places in the entire world.
Of course it is.
And I know that's a really important place for you.
Yeah.
Tell us why and tell us what makes Portugal special.
I'm going to take a step back. I believe that this country was built on the backs of immigrants. And as a first-generation American, that first and foremost brings me a lot of pride. And that pride is centered around culture, centered around food, people, feelings. And when I go to Portugal, like, I'm not a foreigner. I feel like I'm home. Yes, Portugal has great cities, great things to do, But for me, first and foremost, there's this word we have in Portuguese that doesn't really encapsulates multiple words in English, but it's saudades. And it's that longing, that feeling when I step off of that plane, I have the saudades. So for me, it's and of course my wife is Portuguese, my kids are Portuguese. That's where we go every summer, and so for us, it's core to who we are.
Well, it is a place that I absolutely want to visit.
Anytime.
So maybe we should go together.
Oh yeah. Well, one day when I'm there, I'll let you know. I'll be retired there.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today.
No,
This
thank
is
you,
very
Steve.
special.
Yeah. No.
And thank you for joining us in another edition of Brewin on Broad Street.